Hello everyone, welcome to homework 8. We are factoring and solving all quadratics. Basically, this is taking the last 3 lessons, lessons 5, 6, and 7, and putting it all together. So when you actually have to factor, I'm not going to tell you, or you're not going to be told, this is the easy trinomial, this is the hard trinomial, this is a difference of squares, this is just taking the GCF. You're going to have to figure out what you need to do. So this is just all mixed together. This isn't anything new. This is just kind of a review lesson. So this first page here is just kind of everything that we've done. You've got the greatest common factor, your GCF. Now, they have it with a trinomial. More times, at least for this class, you're going to see something more like x squared minus 5x. And I'm not sure why this stumps so many people, but when you only have 2 terms, you want to always look, even if you've got 3 terms, 4 terms, 5 terms, always look, can I factor out something? And in this case, we can factor out an x. And once I factor out that x, we're left with x minus 5. So that's how we're going to be using it in this class, or even something like 6x squared minus 3x. That time your GCF isn't just x, but it's also 3. So you factor out a 3x, and that leaves you with 2x minus 1. Okay, so always look for a GCF first. Then you have 2 terms. If you have a difference of squares, and so notice that this is underlined, it's bold. This has to be a minus right here. Okay, if it's a plus, then that's prime. And so their example over here is 100a squared minus 9b squared. So all they're doing is taking the square root of both. So the square root of 100a squared is 10a. The square root of 9b squared is 3b. And then you've got 1 plus and 1 minus. Okay, then you have 3 terms. You either have an easy trinomial or a hard trinomial. What makes it easy versus hard is if you have 1 as your coefficient. So when a is 1, that's the easy one. You just go into either, they make a diamond, but you go into your x. Up here is your a times c. Down here is your b. And so you want to know what adds up to b but multiplies to ac. And once you get those 2 numbers here, then it just becomes x this, x this. And then your hard trinomial has a couple extra steps with that one. Hard is when you have anything greater than 1. So notice here you have a 6. So you still make your x. You have your a times c. So 6 times negative 2 to get that negative 12. Your b terms down here, so your coefficient is 1. What adds up to b multiplies to ac, and you take these numbers here. Now this is where it becomes different, right? Instead of it just becoming k plus 4 and k minus 3, that doesn't work because right off the bat, k times k is k squared, and I need a 6k squared. Okay, so that's your first hint that that's not right. So once you find those 2 numbers, now you have to rewrite that middle term. So you bring down your 6k squared, but this plus k becomes these 2 here. So plus 4k minus 3k, and then bring down your minus 2. And then you factor by grouping. And then the last one here is if you have 4 terms, try to factor by grouping. You had a couple homework questions like that for homework 7, but you won't have any just factoring by grouping in this one. Okay, so now that we've kind of reviewed everything, we've got a couple examples down here, 8 examples, and then that will be it. So factor completely. On A, first thing you're always looking for is a GCF. I have a GCF. What can I divide into 8 and 12? And that's going to be 4. And then you have an x squared and an x. You can take out an x in both. So now divide. So 8 divided by 4 is 2. X squared divided by x is x. Let me move this down some. Okay, and then negative 12, what I'm doing here is I'm dividing both of these by that GCF. So negative 12 divided by 4 is 3, and then those x's cancel. And so this is all you have to do here. Okay, and really easy way to check it, right? Distribute that back. 4x times 2x gives me 8x. And 8x squared, right? And 4x minus 3 gives me a minus 12. So that one works. On B, look for a GCF. Do we have a GCF? You've got 2 even numbers, so I can at least divide out a 2, right? And we always want this squared term to be positive. It just makes it a lot easier. So instead of just taking out a 2, I'm going to take out a negative 2. So negative 72 divided by 2 gives me 36 y squared. And 2 divided by negative 2 gives me a minus 1. Notice I can't take out a y in this one because this last term doesn't have a y like it did on A. And so now we have a difference of squares, right? We've got the minus in between. I don't know why that keeps shifting that up. That's annoying me, but take the square root of both of those numbers. So I'm going to bring down my negative 2. So the square root of 36y squared is 6y. The square root of 1 is 1. And then you need 1 plus and 1 minus. Okay, so that's my final answer there. So typically when you get 2 terms, those are usually pretty easy. Okay, on C. Always look for a GCF first. Do I have a GCF? And I do. My GCF here is 3. So once I take out a 3, divide everything by 3. And that leaves me with x squared minus 6x plus 9. So now I have a trinomial. And so is this an easy trinomial or a hard trinomial? Well, this one here would have been hard, right? Because my a is a number. But here, because my a is 1, that makes this one an easy one. So in a trinomial, we got to go into our x. My a times c is 1 times 9. And then my b term is right here. That's negative 6. So what adds up to negative 6 but multiplies to 9? That's going to be negative 3 and negative 3. Negative 3 times negative 3 gives me a positive 9, but when I add them together, we get that negative 6. Now, if you need to, you can write this out as x minus 3 and x minus 3. But once you see you have the same binomial, you need to condense that. So that becomes 3 times x minus 3 quantity squared. Okay, this right here is called your perfect square trinomial. Okay, we've talked about that in the last 3 lessons, so this is the 4th lesson in a row that this has come up. I keep mentioning this because I say we're going to need it later. We're going to need it next lesson later. So actually homework 9 and 10, perfect square trinomials are going to be a really big deal. Okay, on D, always look for a GCF first. Do I have one? Well, all 3 terms have an X, so I can factor out an X. So that means they all go 1 degree down. So X cubed becomes squared, X squared just becomes X, and now that minus 12X becomes just a regular minus 12. So we have another trinomial. Is it easy or hard? Well, whether you're looking here or here, A is 1. So this is another easy one. So my A times C is 1 times negative 12. And then my B term is right here. It is 1. So it adds up to 1, but multiplies to a negative 12. And that's going to be 4 and negative 3. Be careful with those signs. If you do negative 4 and 3, that still multiplies together to become negative 12, but then that adds up to a negative 1, and I need a positive 1. So watch the signs. So because this is an easy one, I can just go straight into my factor. So I'm going to bring down my GCF of X, and this becomes X plus 4 and X minus 3. Easy is nice. On E, do I have a GCF? Because we have 11, that's a prime number, and they don't all have an X, so there is no GCF here. So we have a trinomial, so that does mean we have to go into our X. Now this is the first one that's a hard one, because why? Because I have a number in front of my squared term. A is more than 1. So my A times C is 4 times 6. And my B term is 11. So what adds up to 11 but multiplies to 24, and that's going to be 8 and 3. Now because we've already established that this is a hard one, that means that this is not X plus 8 and X plus 3, because again, right off the bat, X times X gives me X squared, and I need a 4X squared. So when that happens, you've got to rewrite your middle term. So we've got 4X squared. Let me move this over a little bit. We've got 4X squared plus 8X plus 3X plus 6. So again, what I did there, and I can't show you because it keeps moving it up. I don't know why that does that, but this 11X turned into 8X plus 3X. Okay, if I combine my like terms, I'm right up to the original, so I'm not changing my problem at all. So now once we have our 4 terms, factor by grouping. So in this first group here, 4X squared plus 8X, I can take out a 4X, and that leaves me with X plus 2. So hopefully we get the same binomial in this next one. So then you look at your second grouping. What's your GCF out of 3X plus 6? And that's a plus 3. And that does leave me with X plus 2. So your 2 binomials. is first what you have in parentheses. So x plus 2. And then what your GCFs were that you pulled out. So 4x plus 3. And so again, that's not really a hard thing to do, right? We call that the hard trinomial. It's not necessarily hard, but it is more steps. On F, excuse me, what do we always look for first? GCF, and I have one. You don't have an x in all of your terms, but they are all even. 12, 26, and 10 are all even numbers, so let's factor out a 2. So that's going to leave me with 6x minus 13x minus 5. So this is a hard trinomial again. Why? Because a is greater than 1. Any trinomial, we got to go into our x. So my a times c is 6 times negative 5. And my b term is negative 13. So what adds up to negative 13, but multiplies to a negative 30, okay, I almost wanted to say 10 and 3. Specifically, negative 10 and negative 3. These two here add up to negative 13, but what happens when you multiply? You get a positive 30. So instead, my answer is negative 15 and 2. Okay, so be careful. It can kind of check one of those boxes, but not both. They got to check both boxes. So now negative 15 times 2 gives me negative 30. And when I add them together, I get the negative 13. And again, be careful with the signs. 15 and negative 2 still multiply to negative 30, but that's going to add up to a positive 13, and I need a negative. So I'm going to forget my 2 for a second, but I do need to remember to bring it down. I'm going to leave that 2 alone. Let's rewrite this middle term. Because this is a hard one, I can't just go to x minus 15 and x plus 2. So I've got 6x squared minus 15x plus 2x minus 5. Again, we didn't change this, right? If I combine like terms, I'm up to my original. So now, factor by grouping. In this first group, we can take out a 3x. And that leaves me with 2x minus 5. So if you notice, I have the same thing here as I have here. And that's okay. Because when I look at this next grouping, I can't take out a GCF. My GCF is technically 1, and so that's what we've got to write so I know what to pair up to this guy here. So I'm taking out a positive 1. That leaves me with 2x minus 5. So now this factors to be what you have in parentheses twice. 2x minus 5. And then what you took out as your GCFs. So 3x plus 1. And I almost boxed this, but what did we take out at the very beginning? We took out that 2, so he needs to come down as well. Now all of these have just been factoring. And I knew that by looking at it because it didn't have an equal sign. When these have equal signs, now I have to take it that one more step and solve it. So, when you're solving, your step 1 is, does this equal not does C equal 0, just does your equation equal 0. Step 2 is look for a GCF. Step 3, factor, and these are all going to be mixed up. And then step 4 is to use that zero factor property. So when you find the X-intercept, all you do is set y equal to 0 and then solve for x. So in F, and that should be A, okay, in A, we've got y equals x times the quantity x plus 7. So first step, set y equal to 0. And then what do you know? This is already in factored form. So we are already on step 4. This first one just becomes x equals 0. And then this next one here, you've got x plus 7 equals 0. Subtract your 7. And you've got x equals negative 7. So what does this look like? All right, this means we have some parabola right here, and it's going to cross right here at negative 7, and it's going to cross right here at 0. Okay, and of course we need to write those as ordered pairs. That's negative 7, comma 0, and 0, 0. Okay, on B, I kind of wrote over it, but we've got 0 equals 3x squared minus 12. So this one's not factored yet, so we do need to do that. So step 1, does it equal 0? And it does. Step 2, do I have a GCF? And I do. What's my GCF here? Hopefully you can see that it is 3. That's going to leave me with an x squared minus 4. So we've got a difference of squares. So I've got 0 equals 3 times the square root of x squared is x. The square root of 4 is 2. And then you need 1 plus and 1 minus. Now we got to take it one more step. And step 4, we've got to solve it. So I don't need to set this 3 equal to 0. I mean, I guess you could, right? But that doesn't make sense. 3 does not equal 0. So that's not a solution. And we knew that from the beginning because how many solutions am I going to have? Well, it's an x squared. So it means I could have 2 answers. On part D here, where you had 3, that means you could have 3 answers, right? So you've got x equals 0, x equals negative 4, and x equals 3. But this one only has 2. Look at those degrees to help you out. So I'm not even going to pay attention to that 3. So I've got x plus 2 equals 0 to give me x equals negative 2. And x minus 2 equals 0 to get x equals 2. So again, what does that graph look like? We've got a parabola that crosses right here at negative 2 and crosses right here at 2. All right, So that's all I've got on factoring. Hopefully you're kind of sick of factoring because you're like, all right, I get it already. Okay, that's a good sign. If you find this one challenging, don't get too frustrated with it. It does have a lot of problems, 21 problems to be exact. But like I said, if there is nothing else you get from this lab class, please, 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 this is what I want you to take from this lab class. If there's nothing else you do in it, focus on factoring because it's going to be around forever. As always, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to email me. Bye, guys.